Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled How Literature Review Automation and Efficient Processes Streamline RWE HEOR Studies. This webinar is sponsored by Distiller SR, so a huge thank you to them for helping to make this event possible. Joining us today, we're fortunate to have 4 research professionals from various organizations participating in this roundtable discussion. I'll first introduce Dr. Shirley Sylvester, who leads the women's health team at Johnson & Johnson. Next up, we have Vardini Ganesh, a data visualization and analysis scientist in assignment at Sanofi. Our third speaker with us today is Richa Goyal Rai, who leads the scientific literature reviews team at IQVIA. And our final speaker joining us is Leanne Burke, an account executive representing Evidence Partners today. And now I want to introduce Dr. Patty Peoples, who will be moderating today's event. She is president and founder of HealthEconomics.Com and also serves in a dual role as vice president of evidence and content with Scientist.com. Patty, take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Sydney, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really glad that you're here. 3 million. More than 3 million scientific articles are published in English every year, and that volume is growing almost 10% annually. Now, researchers from every discipline are sharing a universal dilemma. How do you keep up with this volume of current information and make sense of it to drive patient care? Disciplines that deal with the evidentiary basis of pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, and medical devices are particularly challenged by this. And this problem is exacerbated by the increasing emphasis on real-world data. Now, RWE and RWD have shown immense value for companies that have invested those resources to develop, measure, and apply this data meaningfully. From the C-suite to payers, to bedside clinicians, and to the patient, all are increasingly viewing RWE as strategically important in healthcare decision-making and policy-making. But dealing with this volume of literature, which can be incredibly heterogeneous, it's like rowing a leaky boat across a big data sea. And the primary source of that leak is the traditional literature review, that historic cornerstone of evidence-based research. But you know that manual reviews using spreadsheets, they're difficult, they take a long time, and they're really prone to errors. Now, today with our esteemed panel, we're going to discuss how literature review automation and efficient processes can help streamline your use, management, and application of HEOR and RWE data. We're going to be bringing together several different viewpoints, and they represent different aspects of the literature review and management of evidence. We have a medical director. We also have a leader of a very large team that conducts hundreds of systematic literature reviews for a consultancy. We have a data scientist charged with data visualization, and a medical librarian who works with an automated AI-powered software tool for literature review. Now, our goal is to identify some common challenges and to offer solutions from different stakeholders so that you can walk out of today's webinar with some additional tools in your toolbox to help you conduct better, faster, and more accurate literature reviews. I'm really glad you're here. Let's get started. Leanne, take it away.
Thanks for setting the stage for today's discussion, Patty. All of our panelists work with RWE and RWD and use Distiller SR to manage their literature review processes. To give some context for our audience, I will take a few minutes to introduce the tool and see how it fits with HEOR. Distiller SR is a SaaS-based platform that manages the entire review lifecycle, from search to reporting. Distiller SR automates the management of literature collection, triage, and assessment using intelligent workflows and artificial intelligence. The workflow is based on your literature review protocol and methods. The true flexibility of the tool lies in the fact that the end user can build or modify their workflow to suit the needs of their reviewers and meet the demands of their protocols. It's a permissions-based system which guides the focus of the reviewer so that they are only focusing on the critical tasks that are assigned to them, and a lot of the administrative effort is removed. Reviewers can perform all tasks in the platform, which guarantees a complete audit log of the process. All a reviewer needs is a web browser and an internet connection. And this allows for collaboration that follows the sun across different geographic and time zones and caters to remote workers. Distiller SR will centrally track and manage reviews, automating the review process at scale to manage the growing volume of published references, which are due in part to real-world evidence. This will reduce the human effort required to capture high-quality data from the literature. In addition, Distiller SR can extend to different data and platforms, such as safety databases and reporting applications, say predictive or BI-based tools. You can also build and save reports in Distiller SR and schedule reports to be sent to key stakeholders via email. Distiller SR is used by a range of industries and practice areas, from pharma all the way through to academic institutions and everything in between. We have customers around the world on 5 different continents. This diversity in our customer base underscores the ability and flexibility of Distiller SR for multiple use cases. In every use case, including HEOR, the more layers of automation you build in Distiller SR, the more time you can save while being assured that the integrity of your protocol is maintained and can be verified in an audit log at any time. Researchers in HEOR have long used RWD and RWE to assess the effectiveness, safety, and value of pharmaceutical products after they receive regulatory approval. From a literature review perspective, however, these sources of data, unstructured and structured, as you can see in this chart, compound the speed to which data is captured and used for scientific research, and further act as an accelerant to the already astonishing growth of published scientific research. Applied across a continuum of clinical discovery and trial design, then RWE and RWE likely mean more, not less, scientific research and requires, in our view, an automated, configurable literature review software. An approach that can handle large volumes of scientific references in a transparent, structured workflow. And a workflow that can be configured to support different review types based on an HEOR study's requirements. If you want to learn more about how Distiller SR can support HEOR professionals, register for our upcoming Distiller SR demo. The registration link is posted in the Resources tab. Our mission is better research, smarter reviews, and trusted evidence. Back to you, Patty.
Thanks, Leanne. I really appreciate that platform that you set for our audience. Let's invite our panel to come on after the poll. We're going to start with a poll to get a sense of who's online with us. And can you please respond? Are you currently using literature reviews for RWE study design? Let us know yes or no. All right. It looks like we are showing about a 60% of you do use literature reviews for RWE study design, and approximately 4 out of 10 are not currently. But I'm assuming that you are here because you were working with large volumes of the data, or you anticipate the change of this approach to include RWE and RWD in time. Thank you for participating in this poll. I'd like to now invite all of our panel to the camera. and we will kick off on our discussion. Thank you. We're going to start out with a question and directed towards Shirley and Risha. Now, RWE is used in multiple stages throughout the drug, medical, and diagnostic process, the drug discovery, as well as post-approval stages. How are you using RWE and RWD in your particular job? Shirley, let's begin with you.
Thank you, Patty, and good morning, everybody, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this important venue. I sit at a very interesting intersection of policy and driving also changes in clinical practice to transform the lives of women. And so that's sort of the premise of the team where I work. So I use RWE perhaps in a different way than most of the panel here and perhaps some of the attendees in the room. Not necessarily to comply with regulatory requirements, but mostly to inform decision making as it relates to policies related to how women seek care and how women receive healthcare in the healthcare ecosystem. So it is important for us as we really look at RWE that we draw upon insights from the numerous and the vast amount of information that is existing, as you alluded to, more than 3 million. And I can have examples that I can express later on about, specific things where we have tried to find answers, and the volume of the literature is so vast that we really need to rely on literature reviews to ensure that we draw upon the insights that we are really intending to. So bottom line, I use it as a way to inform decision-making from a policy and from a clinical practice change perspective.
Thank you, Shirley. Risha, why don't you share your perspective from the role of managing SLRs in a consultancy?
Thanks, Patty, for the question. And first of all, thank you to the organizers and the wonderful audience for taking out time. I know we are joining from across the globe, and in certain countries, it's pretty late. So thank you so much for joining. So Patty, coming to your question, I have seen the evolution of RWE and SLR over last 14 to 15 years, right? I started it at a very, very nascent stage, and I've seen it, the evolution of the same. So today, fortunately, I head over a team of more than 100 people, and SLR is kind of a bread and butter for us. So how RWE and SLR relate to is, we know RWE is basically an amalgamation of primary and secondary data. So fortunately, I have the opportunity to work towards the secondary data in the form of systematic reviews or targeted reviews, which feed into the RWE evidence. How this evidence is used? Generally by the regulatory bodies for the reimbursement purposes. So I would like to say, like, over past 10 to 12 years, I have seen this evolving over time.
Thank you so much. You really come to us with an enormous experience on managing not only the volume of the literature, but the volume of the systematic reviews. So let's now bring in Risha to this discussion. As we think about the role that each of our panelists play as evidence-based researchers that are tasked with managing that increased demand for RWE insights, what are some of the major pain points, Risha, that you are dealing with at the point of delivery? And then Vardini, you can add to that from your level.
Thanks, Patty, for the question. So I would like to start with one very small, very common example. Let's say if you used to type NSCLC or any other disease name in Medline, let's say 10 years back. Medline used to throw up thousands of articles. Now, if you type any disease name in the Medline, the results have grown by leaps and bounds. Now, the challenge is the company who commissioned the SLRs to us, they won't give us double the money or double the time. Right. Now, how do we manage it efficiently within the same time frame, bringing it that kind of quality as per the speed? So that is one of the major challenge that today we are facing.
Vardini, talk to us a little bit about your role as a data scientist and charged with making sense of the data. What are some of your pain points?
Thank you so much, Patty, for allowing us this stage, and thank you to everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. God knows in what time zones we are on in this global platform. But as we see, Richa and Shirley brought in some very important perspectives. I come from the research and development wing. And being a data scientist, let me just put in some perspective to what real world evidence means to us in the first place before I get to the pain point. So, for us, real world evidence within the research and development wing typically means avoiding redundancy of efforts so that we can come up with cutting edge technologies and medicines, drugs, and vaccines out there to the public as soon as possible. And COVID-19 has been the best example. Imagine if we all sat in our nutshells, sitting in our laboratories, doing our own thing, and not exchanging information, not tapping into real world data or real world evidence, we may not have accomplished of having the emergency authorized vaccine. So to that point, and to just add on to what Richa mentioned about the vast leap and bound that we have in terms of data and literature by just a small keyword, I think that is one of the major challenges even in literature reviews or even in research and development. And apart from that, staying on track has been the biggest challenge of having a clear cut exclusion inclusion criterias of not just going by go fish method and casting a wide net, but also focusing on what is your major outcome that you need to address.
Mm-hmm.
So these have been some of the challenges, and having to do these things manually is another pain point, especially when you have about 200 reviews sitting in front of your eyes and trying to read and make sense and pull data in the first place. So automation seems to have been the right approach, the right way of getting into things, and I think the biggest challenge for us has been that.
So, Vardini, you alluded to this where you don't want to go fish, but inevitably we begin a process go fishing. We may do it
Yes.
with intentionally greater precision. But can you talk a little bit about how your approach to defining your process is better and more accurate using these automation
Absolutely.
approaches?
I have a favorite phrase, Patty, to say sanity of search. So search string sanity. This is a favorite phrase that I use always. And right there is the essence of trying to understand of how to make sure that the go fish method is not a stray method. So having a defined protocol is very essential whenever you do any sorts of reviews. Systematic review is just a methodological way of doing things, but there are different types of reviews that we all do, and text mining that we do in general as well. So having a well-defined protocol, having a well-defined exclusion criteria has been some of the methods we have employed to ensure that yes, we do cast a wider net in terms of the search string that we put in place, but also set those boundaries well enough so that the outcomes are well achieved. And they are more of closed-ended questions than just open-ended research questions for us.
Understood. Shirley, let me get your perspectives. In many respects, you are the internal stakeholder that someone like Vardini is serving, or someone like Risha has been hired by. What are some of the pain points you have as the recipient of this process, and has this changed at all as we have gotten better at automating and developing platforms that can give more accurate results?
Yeah, no, excellent question, Patty. Indeed, things have changed for the better in terms of the automation. I think that long gone are the days where you had to use, Excel documents to do this. I'm really glad that there are platforms that exist today that really allow vendors, or even if sometimes we do it ourselves internally to really have a more of an automated process. And from the perspective where I sit now, when I interact with people externally that provide this service, I also want them to have efficiencies. I also want them to use the time in a valuable way, not really fishing
Mm-hmm.
in the wrong pond, but really fishing where the answers are. So it is really critical that these automation processes are in place, that they are developed, that we continue to evolve them, because at the end of the day, the benefits of it are not just for us who are the ultimate recipient, so to speak, but for people who can have better processes and can have better answers or more accurate answers to a question. Just to give you an example, in this just recent example in COVID-19, I was conducting an SLR. We did it just internally, and because we wanted to go fast, but that was really an error on our part,
Mm-hmm.
because we realized we had over 1 million in just this short time frame. In 6 months that we wanted to look at something, there were over 1 million papers that spit out some of the criteria that we were trying to do. And we narrowed the criteria even more, but that didn't really change the number that much. So it is really critical that we have a better understanding of how to automate these initiatives, so we can really get to the insights more efficiently and faster at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It strikes me, correct me if I'm wrong, that through an automating process, Shirley, it maybe gives you more of a freedom as being the stakeholder, the user of the evidence that's getting ready to communicate it to your client base, your customer base, that if you haven't asked the right question initially, you're not stuck with less than good results, that you have the ability to go back and say, I need to refine that process. I need to change the search criteria, that it enables you to really learn by doing. But if you need to go back around the block, so to speak, then you have a little bit more freedom to do that. Am I right there or not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are absolutely correct. It does give us the freedom to iterate, as we go.
Mm-hmm.
It gives us the freedom to change course if we're not really fishing in the right pond. If
Mm-hmm.
we wait for 6 months to go through all the evidence, and then at the end of the 6 months you realize you haven't even gotten to the answer, you're wasting precious time. So I think it is really important. It gives you that flexibility also to look at something. Obviously you start with a protocol, but along the way you realize that maybe the search criteria, maybe your inclusion criteria has to be tightened. Maybe some of the words have to be, refined. The word searching have to be refined. So it gives you that flexibility to change the course for the better. Because at the end of the day, what
Mm-hmm.
you want is to be able to gather the insights that you need to communicate to your external stakeholders and all the people that you serve.
Mm-hmm. Audience, why don't you drop some comments and let us know how you're experiencing these pain points. We want to hear from you. While the audience is thinking through that, Risha, I want to bring your perspective in. Shirley mentioned that it might take a 6-month process for as you fish in a pond, and then you fish in a different pond, and then you change your bait, and you decide that you need to refine your process and your words a little more. All the while you're doing that, more data are coming in, more resource, more publications are coming in. So talk to us a little bit about how you manage getting new literature coming into the process while you're working on a search strategy and a review in real time. How do you move with that process?
Thanks, Patty. A great question. In fact, recently we have been commissioned by one of the companies where we have to publish the updates on weekly basis. So, which means go fish every week, like every Monday, I have to run the searches. By Wednesday, I have to report the results. Then comes the Monday again, and I have to go fishing or hunting again and submitting the results by
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday. Now, how do I do it? And it is basically on very common diseases like COVID-19 or flu, which has thousands and hundreds and thousands of papers being published on weekly basis. Now, how do I do that? So that in that case, Patty, automation helps us a lot, right? With finding proper keywords, running the screening, because as we know, screening is the most tedious and the time consuming part when it comes to a systematic literature review. So if we have a tool which automates some processes or can expedite a lot of things, then definitely we can meet on those kinds of demands. So Patty, I have started relying on automation a lot to serve these kinds of requests, which are flowing in a lot now.
Vardini, I know that you have some thoughts on accuracy of search strategy and separating good from bad. Would you like to comment?
Absolutely. So we have DNA, we have the coding DNA, we have the junk DNA, but although we say junk, it is a vast knowledge base. Now, that's how I treat literature as well. Literature is out there vast, and there's nothing called as good or bad literature, but it is about what's relevant to your outcome, what's relevant to your research question. Everything else then becomes the outside, the junk DNA, if you'd have to call it. Although it's got meat, but it's not the relevant meat, it's not the relevant pond where we are fishing. So it is very important for us during the screening process to be able to make that distinction, to bucket those relevant searches and keep those non-relevant searches, because human mind is a very tricky one. And it gets excited at every point during a protocol is set in place. So it is important, again, to also bind yourself by those protocols in a systematic fashion and not just get all fancied up by the glitters out there just because there are papers, and stick to those relevant data articles. So you see, that's the parallels I generally try to draw when it comes to data. And all data is good or bad as long as how you put the best use of it.
I love that line that there is not good and bad literature. It's only relevant or not relevant. That's an excellent takeaway. Leanne, I'm going to bring you into this discussion because we have got several questions that have come in. And this one's particularly interesting. Matthias, thank you. What is the ability to properly capture RWE studies given the limitations in appropriate indexing? And you have a librarian background, so as well as you work with Distiller SR. So maybe you can give us that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And the indexing of any data in the literature is always a challenge, right? Some databases use actual humans that do the indexing, and in some cases it's done by machines. But in any case, certainly there are limitations that are going to appear. And so, typically we're trying to get a balance between precision and recall. So we use that indexing and we use keywords when we're performing the search. Now, as it pertains to Distiller SR, I think the ability for you there, or the opportunity, is that you could cast your net a little bit wider, and that would allow you to be more inclusive, be more comprehensive, because the indexing isn't as strong. You might have to, go a little bit broader in your search strategy. But once you're in Distiller SR, you have that smart workflow that you can design. You can use labels and filters. You can create a hierarchical data extraction process. And there's lots of ways that you can take your protocol and turn it into logic models that can triage and move that data through different processes in your workflow. What this means functionally is that you could see an article that's of interest. You don't want to go fish, but you also don't want to lose it. So you'll be able to use a filter or a label to put it over here, so you'll be able to find it later. And as you're working through this automation in these processes, there's a strong reporting tool in Distiller SR, which means at the end of it all, you'll be able to see relationships that you might not have been able to see otherwise.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Ruth. Question to the panelists. Have you found that some RWE is mostly found in non-published or gray literature? And if yes, what sources are searched? And then is Distiller SR capable to manage this and import it? Let's begin with Risha, and then Vardini, I'd like for you to weigh in as well.
Okay, thanks, Patty, and thanks to the audience for asking this question. For relying, yes, it is very true that we have to search other data sets rather than Google, Embase, or Cochrane. So there is something called as CRI literature. So we rely a lot on Google Scholar and other databases so that we can have the research in the holistic way, right? Then when we are uploading in the platforms like Distiller, what we have to do it, we have to bring all those searches in a common format so that Distiller can take it out and the further process can take place. So yes, it is true for searching for RWE, we have to take that holistic approach of searching the web. So that's my take on it, Patty.
Thank you. Vardini, your experience with gray literature.
Yes. So I very well agree with whatever Richa mentioned, but a slight add-on to the research and development aspects is we dwell a lot with clinical trials. And for us, clinicaltrials.gov, trialtrials.gov, all these registries, Cochrane database, for instance, are very important aside from just the Medline or even conference abstracts for that matter, audio recordings. So all of these are also equally important when it comes to data. You never know. They're all embedded in small tables somewhere or some small snapshot or image at one of the abstracts. So it is important that we cast our net in that fashion, explore all relevant databases again, based on the nature of your application. Like, for instance, for Shirley, it might be a different set of databases. For Richa, it might be a different set of databases. For research and development, it might be a different set of databases. So it is important to identify those, make sure to search all of them. And as Richa mentioned, all of this is well formatted within Distiller SR based on experience, and we can definitely go through the screening process.
Thank you, Vardini. Shirley, I'm going to go to you and bring in you. You may.
Sorry, Pat, if I may add on, social media also serves a vast network for getting the RWE data. So we can get data from profiles like LinkedIn, Insta, Facebook. They have certain patient groups from where the RWE data collected can be of great use.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Shirley, from your perspective, since you are engaged at trying to drive policy change and outcomes improvement in maternal health, what kind of data are you allowing into your decision making? And are you utilizing some of these gray literature or social listing components into your process?
Yeah, and I'm glad that actually we touch upon this point because as we know, there are many different ways that we can use RWE and RWD. And in my situation, the engines and the way that we extract information may be a little bit different. On one hand, for example, I give you the example of maternal health. In maternal health equity, we obviously wanna read and have access to the strong evidence about a specific, let's say, a specific research intervention to improve maternal health, and that will require sort of similar or really the regular databases that you may look into it. At the same time, in maternal health equity, we're trying to elevate the voice of women. We're trying to really emphasize that, a woman is not a number. A woman has a story behind her. And we really want to bring that to life, because actually for policy changes and for bringing that perspective of the patient voice, into that conversation of policy is really important. That is not just a number, but there is a person who lived through that traumatic experience. So the social listening part is actually very critical. And we have undertaken various research projects in which we are using social listening as a way to elevate the woman's voice as well. So that's on the space of maternal health. But when we work on other things. So if we want, for example, to really look at the differential impact of COVID-19 by sex, it seems like a simple question. It seems like everybody knew from the beginning, oh, men are definitely more impacted than women. But when you look underneath that question, it wasn't that simple. So initially there was evidence that men by numbers they were having higher mortality and so on, but then throughout the pandemic that number actually evened out. But what I wanted to say is that to answer that question, we really had to go through a vast amount of literature because the majority of studies do not disaggregate the data in a way that can really help you answer that question. So what Bardini was saying about the table that is obscure somewhere in the supplement, that the supplemental data or just a footnote that is somewhere that alludes to that sex disaggregation, that's what we're looking for. So we went through an exercise to answer that question of the differential impact by sex, and we realized that of that vast amount of information, we ended up actually with 35 articles that really could help us answer the question. Because we were really looking for that needle in the haystack, and we found the needle in the haystack usually in that supplemental information, because it's not journals usually just limit the amount of information you can publish, and it's not common for people to publish the data in a disaggregated way. So I mean, I think it is important to emphasize that to answer your question, you need to really ensure that you are coupled with somebody who really understands how to look for the answers, where to look for the answers, and that we are open-minded about also the inclusion of patient voice into our the analysis and the insights that we're gonna use to inform policy changes.
Thank you. That's a really excellent example. I see that our audience has been wonderful and shared their own opinions about their pain points and that they are currently facing in literature review processes. And we gave them the option to choose from the volume of literature, error-prone processes, no proper tools to distinguish between good and bad data, or I might, since I've learned from Vardini, say relevant or not relevant data. Another option is data heterogeneity, which really, really rings a bell with me as an RWE researcher. And lastly, collaboration with colleagues working remotely or located in different time zones. So our audience, if you have not voted, I hope you will, but it looks like we've got a really good selection right now. So what you have said is about half of you say that volume of literature is your major challenge. I think our panel kicked off with that as the big challenge for them too. The second one was no proper tools to distinguish between the relevant and not relevant. The third, at 17%, was data heterogeneity. Errors of about 10% was the major pain point. And lastly, collaboration with colleagues working remotely or across time zones. So thank you very much, audience, for that. I want to get to a couple of more questions, panel. Some good ones coming in. And audience, keep them coming. These are really rich for our discussion, and we really, really want to hear from you. I'm going to go to this one with Vardini. Can you share some information on options for displaying and reporting data at the end of the data extraction process? Vardini, you're a data visualization scientist, and then Leanne, I'd like for you to kick in with your perspective of exactly how Distiller can facilitate that. So, Vardini?
Patty, I love this question. This is kind of my bread and butter forte, I should say. So let me put it this way. Data reporting mechanism, it is fine that you report data in rows and columns in Excel spreadsheet. What is the challenge and the major obstacle in such kind of an exercise is reshaping of the data and reshaping in such a fashion of what is that outcome that you want to visualize. So this is in itself a process of having to extract data. Now, I can definitely endorse that Distiller SR, for that matter of fact, did help a great deal with data extraction process purely because of the ability of creating these forms. And there were certain detailed steps that helped ensure that the process of data reshaping was no longer required. And then using that data, connect them to any kind of a cloud database. You can use different visualization tools. You have so many out there like Power BI, business intelligence tools, Tableau, Spotify, R, Python. I mean, there's vastness in terms of, and as basic and simple as Excel graphs, right? If you want some basic insights, quick business decisions to be made of certain major or very bird's eye view kind of a data. And in-depth analysis, you can definitely use business intelligence tools like Power BI, ClickSense, ClickView, Tableau. Connect these data sources directly to your visualization software to be able to show that reporting mechanism. On another note, Distiller SR also offers certain insights, for that matter, to come up with these kind of bird's eye view reporting. So I think as I said, this is a very favorite topic. I can go on and on, but I would definitely love to give Leon the opportunity to give us more about Distiller SR.
Thanks, Vardini. I think one of the key things that I often tell customers as we're getting started is that we want them to think about what data points they will want at the end and to think about all of them, if possible. But as we've talked about today, it's an iterative process. And so sometimes what happens is we get partway through a review and we go, oh, wait a second, there's something else we should have collected, and that's okay. Distiller SR can handle that. You can make changes in your forms or in your workflow, and then automatically all of those references that require that extra data point will be moved back to the correct reviewer to just review that one piece. Nothing will be lost, nothing will be missed, and all the time the audit log will capture when and how that data was accumulated. So at some point, if you want to know how many of them had to be reviewed again, you'll be able to extract that data. So it's about your setup from beginning to end, but understanding that that iterative piece can happen and still Distiller can allow that automation. And I think Vardini did a great job of expressing that the tool within Distiller really allows you to decide what and how you want to report. You can be very granular or very broad, and you can set up relationships and report on them. I can't underscore enough that the flexibility of Distiller SR in terms of reporting and all of the workflow is really a key to why it's such a terrific tool.
Thank you, Leanne. And audience, there's a lot of questions coming in that are very Distiller SR specific. And I want to let you know that, that there is a training program, a demonstration that is coming up. If you're interested in a deeper dive of the tool that can and how it can support you in HEOR, RWE, writing, or decision making, you can register for the upcoming Distiller SR demo that's going to be held on March 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The time will have changed. And we have that registration link over in the Resources tab. I'll repeat all of that at the end of the webinar, but since there were so many questions coming in about that, I wanted to go ahead and give you that info. All right, let's take another question. I'm loving these. Is the panel game for this?
Oh, yes, of course.
Questions? Yeah. All right. Surrendar, I hope I pronounced your name properly. Today, the focus is on building an easily reliable and reusable base with an understandable interface. But what about the efficiency and performance? Leanne, why don't you take that? And then if there's any other panelists that would like to edify, you feel free. So Leanne, let's talk a little bit about efficiency and performance.
Absolutely. I'll start with efficiency. And I think one easy way to direct people, and if someone can throw a link up in the sources tab, you could go to Distiller SR's website and you'll see a number of case studies we have with different customers who will comment on the efficiency of time that they have gained through the process of using Distiller SR. So that automation really does two things. It removes that manual administrative work, and that creates an efficiency just by itself, even before we use artificial intelligence or any other tool. Just removing that administrative effort is a first piece. At the same time, it's performing very well in that it's reducing the chance of error. Because your reviewer can only do the tasks that are assigned to them, and you've created the workflow in such a way that they have to answer the questions, and you can make rules about what is mandatory and what is not, and use drop-down menus and different pieces in the tool, it means that the chances of error is greatly reduced. And the other thing is that the reviewer is more efficient with some little tools and big tools that are in Distiller. The one I'll mention is keyword highlighting. So when you set up your workflow, you can highlight the keywords that are most important, which means that reviewer can see very efficiently the word they're looking for. If they're looking for RCT or randomized control trial, it's going to be in pink. They're going to see it. It's going to improve their performance and make sure they're not missing the key things that might determine inclusion or exclusion criteria. And lastly, I guess I would just also touch on the fact that if you're also doing assessment of the literature itself, we have a lot of forms that are already created for things like risk of bias and quality control. And so those pieces are already built into Distiller SR as templates.
Any other experiences from the trenches from our panel on that? And if not, I'll go right to Distiller.
Yeah, I have been using Distiller since last 4 years now, and I absolutely love all these functionalities. We started initially with keyword highlighting, and now we have graduated to use the AI automation functionalities as well. So yes, I absolutely echo.
Patty, if I may add a point to what Leanne was mentioning. So Leanne did speak to a project-specific performance and efficiency, definitely. I just wanted to add one more layer, that Distiller SR also has the capability of using existing forms into different projects. So that also speeds your process of doing your systematic reviews or literature reviews without having to invest a lot of time. So that is, again, gain of time and making sure that the performance of it and the efficiency of it is intact because it's already a readily available prototype. So just one other point to Leanne's point.
Yeah, and what I was going to say to the question, sorry, Patty, was that to me, efficiency and performance is the number one criteria to select anything. And the visualization to me comes next. At least that's sort of the pattern that I use to select a system or to select, a tool that can help me. Yeah, it's nice to have visual, beautiful charts and information, but if the performance of that system is not useful, then it really won't really help me. So I think, the important part is that the performance and the efficiency of the tool it's a must, and the rest actually is added value.
Fantastic. Audience, thank you for these questions. They're really enriching our conversation. We still want to hear from you, but this time in the form of a poll. So, Sydney, if you might toss that poll number 3 up for the audience. And attendees, how are you currently using automation to support your literature review process? If you're doing it in a traditional way or not, let us know. Our search alerts and reference management, including but not limited to deduplication, artificial intelligence supported screening and identification. Is it automated reporting? For project and team management, or something else that we have not thought of? Let us know. While those results are coming in, I'm going to toss a question out. We really can't go a day without hearing something about rare and orphan diseases and the phenomenal work being done out there and the importance of real-world evidence in driving our understanding of the disease and the impact of interventions and outcomes and policy making as well. Does Distiller have any specific benefits for rare diseases and understanding the landscape for rare diseases? Who would like to take that?
I'll start, Patty, and then maybe someone else has some ideas as I talk. I think one of the key components to helping rare disease would be that you could design a protocol and workflow in Distiller SR that would allow you to cast your net a little bit wider, because in rare diseases, we don't always have as much information as we would like to have. And it's not always clearly reported. It's sometimes hidden in other places. So your initial search could be broader, and then you could let Distiller manage that workflow and be able to create what I'll call buckets for you. Buckets of information that maybe refer to something that is related but not exactly on topic. And you would be able to keep those things well managed in places that they are findable again, but also where you could be comparing that data at a later time or with the current data. And so that reporting piece would also allow you to just see relationships in a different way, because you're able to make the workflow manageable and not too onerous while you're casting that net a little wider.
That's fascinating. Anybody else have any experience with rare disease and using automation or Distiller SR in general for that?
May not be rare diseases, automation definitely, Patty, and using Distiller SR. But just to add some perspective, that Distiller SR is definitely a tool to perform systematic reviews. And rare disease might just be one division of where you can actually perform that review. Let me add another business perspective to the entire pharmaceutical and biotech industry. There's something called as sentiment analysis. Now, what is sentiment analysis is pretty much you're trying to get a flair and feel of how people are reacting to the drugs that are there out in the market, or what is out there in terms of vaccines in the market, to even know whether you should put your money in it. That's a completely different way and perspective of looking at a systematic review being performed to come up with a business strategic decision. So I think you can utilize the tool to perform systematic reviews or literature reviews to probably any topic, from economics to science to health to culture to art. The domains are vast. It's about how, and first thing is about what is your outcome that you're trying to look at. And the second thing is about what steps are you trying to employ to even find out what are the databases or resources out there that capture these kind of domains. And then you create those forms and processes and modules with a tool. And this tool, of course, being a very methodological one, helps you a great deal in being able to do that.
Shirley. Thank you, Bardini.
Thank you. Thank you, Martina. I didn't want to interrupt anybody, but I wanted to say in regards to rare disease also is that just similar to the example I mentioned on COVID and sex differences. I mean, there may be obviously less amount of information, but that net, as Helen alluded to, is going to be cast wider. But one of the things I wanted to say is that, there may be a lot of failed products or compounds in the rare disease space. So expanding the databases and expanding the search to other areas will be important, because you can even learn from the failures of others. Also understanding the pain point of the patient again. So the patient groups, people who are living with these rare disorders, and what they actually are saying in regards to their symptoms, to their disease, to the condition, to how they receive care, and so on, is also critical. So it's just about not only kind of focusing on the regular literature, but also looking a little bit outside the box into other elements of literature that will probably give insights as well.
Thank you, Shirley. Audience, I want to conclude with giving you the results of this third poll. How are you currently using automation to support your literature review processes? And 32% say that you use search alerts and reference management, followed by 1 out of 4 say you use AI-supported screening identification. A little over 10% say you're using it for project and team management, and the remainder in automated reporting. Thank you so much for that. We are at the top of the hour. This has been such a rich discussion. I want to thank all the panelists so much for your depth of experience and your willingness to share your in the trenches experience. It really elevates all of our knowledge base. So thank you for that time. And audience, you have been equally as important in the information that has been shared in this webinar with your very rich questions. And I want to give you one last second to jump another question into the question panel. If there are webinars that you're interested in us doing subsequently from that, just throw it into that question panel. It's wiggling on your screen. Let us know, because Evidence Partners is very, very committed to the overall knowledge base of literature reviews. And we want to, from the organization, really wants to address those needs. So I'm going to wrap up with a reminder that if you are interested in a deeper dive into how Distiller SR can support your specific role, then please register for the upcoming Distiller SR demonstration, and in the resources folder is that registration link. And before you go, we would be so honored if you would please complete the survey and let us know if this met your needs. And I want to thank you again. Panelists, thank you for the time you've spent with us, your knowledge. Audience, thank you, and I hope you all have a marvelous rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Yeah, that
Thank
was really
you.
great to hear all of your insights.